commissioners, directors, public. This meeting of the Village Council of Forest Parks will come to order. This is our budget meeting for Wednesday, July 22nd. We are going to have a work style shop meeting.
Commissioner Maxim.
Here.
Commissioner Mellon Rigovan.
Here.
Commissioner Vogt. Commissioner Nero is excused. Mayor Hoskins.
Here. Over to Administrator.
Okay, so up on the screen, and I think everybody has received, I know everybody has received a copy of this as well, but I've got it up on the screen, is our fiscal year 2027 draft budget. We'll go through the different departments. Commissioners, you'll have opportunities to ask questions about anything that has been proposed in this year's budget. And then we will go from there. We're going to start off, though. I'm going to turn it over to Director Olmstead to just give a brief summary on the different funds and where we're at with them as far as expenses. I do want to say, though, that I just want to remind everybody that the budget is the guide for which village staff work from. It certainly doesn't mean that everything that is in the budget is going to be spent during the year. We budget for we budget for full staffing, and certainly we may not end the year in full staffing. We budget for things that we would like to be able to purchase or utilize during the fiscal year. Director Olmstead and I, throughout the year, always pay attention to where we are with revenue. Not only cash flow, but are the taxes coming in on time, but are we seeing the revenue that we've also projected? So we tell staff to put in the things that they need, the things that they would like to expend for the coming fiscal year. That doesn't necessarily mean that we move forward with it. We monitor, are we over in certain items because of emergencies? We may not approve certain expenses throughout the year, if we see that flowing. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Director Olmstead.
And I just want to piggyback on that comment about, we budget for 100% staffing, we budget for retirement, we budget for needs. When we do the appropriation ordinance, we include allowances for overages. So it's nothing new. It's the same thing we've done year in, year out. But like for just in case, we think there's going to be 2 retirements with this department. Turns out there's 4. So we for every category with the appropriation ordinance, which will be on the agenda on the 27th, we provide for allowances for capital expenditures that were planned for. The equipment that needs to be repaired that wasn't planned for. So that's the appropriation looks completely different than the budget. The budget is the document that we work on. We do not follow the appropriation ordinance strictly for legal purposes. File with the county so that we can then file a tax levy and collect our tax. So just kind of touch base on 2026 really quick. All these numbers will not be finalized until the audits. I don't even have a scheduled date yet. But it does look like our revenue, it's pretty much on the mark. We're close to 100% or just a touch over of general fund revenue. And 2027 revenue, we're projecting a slight increase overall. So a little bit in property tax, there will be CPI is 2.7%. 6 levy. Also did a rough calculation for funds that are still outstanding from the 2024 and 2025 disbursements from the county. That will be current. State taxes, the local share of sales tax, that's been coming in over projection. It has to do with the way the state has kind of recalculated the use tax, which is tax for purchases made online. So now if anything is bought online to a 60130 zip code, we're recognizing that more in sales tax than in use tax. Let's see. A lot of the other state disbursements, I work off the estimates that are provided by IML. They are very conservative in their estimates. I keep the projections pretty conservative as well. Just, depending on the guidance provided per capita from IML. So a lot of state tax, sales tax is pretty much the only increase in the local share of sales tax. And we do have 2 active dispensaries currently. So not including Parkway. Utility franchise tax, that includes taxes from cable and taxes from phone plans, and all of that has declined significantly over the course of years. So other categories, we don't have any scheduled increases for fiscal 2027 as far as revenue goes. We will recognize a few grants that we did not prior year, the FEMA grants for the ICBA equipment. So that is, that's a nice savings in our expenses and complement in revenue. It looks like some of the fine revenue has increased and was over budget for 2026. So I did a kind of modest projection that we will potentially see collections continue there. And we do know that there is a cell tower provider that is looking to terminate their lease in August 2026. That's reported under leases and miscellaneous revenue. So that line of item does reflect that reduction of that lease being terminated. There are also at least 1 or 2 leases where they're looking to renegotiate at reduced rates. And Village Administrator Entler has been working with legal counsel to maintain those sources of revenue. Any questions on general fund revenue? The only other thing, I just kind of want to mention, and I think I said this in the document a couple meetings ago. In 2011, the disbursement from the state for the local government distributive fund for basically the income tax was 10%. And since then, it has been reduced. It's fluctuated a little bit. We're at, I believe, 6.47% right now. So, it's situations like reduction in that revenue that we don't have any control of. The antiquated revenue that we had, that we've not replaced. So franchise fee for cable, the excise tax for telephone. It's just, we've lost revenue and we've not been able to replace it with new revenue. The municipal share of the cannabis tax hasn't really panned out to be what anybody thought it would be. So that of course is just adding to the growing deficit. And then of course our costs are outpacing the increase that we're seeing in revenue. The expenditures for fiscal 2027 full in, it's almost an 11% increase over where we are at fiscal 2026 year end. We'll go through all those by department, so I'm not really going to touch base on that right now. Overall, we're looking at a deficit for 2027, a loss of about $3.7 million, and that will bring our ending fund balance to a deficit of over $5 million in deficit, projecting to end 2026 at a deficit of almost 1.6 million, and then just that will just grow by the budget as proposed currently. The water fund looks to have a healthy, productive year. I know we have a lot of projects going on, wrapping up some current stages of the lead service replacements. The water meter project is almost complete. I know there's the work on Jackson and additional proposed work for design engineering for the Jackson water reservoirs included in here. I believe also the project for the Elgin and Harlem future water main or sewer work is in here as well. And some of those costs are divided between the water fund and the VIP and MFT fund. But the water fund, while projecting a deficit for 2027 year end. It has a fund balance and it's using the reserves of the fund balance to allow for the village to make these infrastructure improvements. Same place for the VIP fund and for the MFT fund. They have healthy fund balances of reserves, and each year we include that in the plans that we make with the 3 to 5 year infrastructure plans, so that we're using the funds as we should. Hopefully revenue coming in, but at the same time using the reserves for the projects as these funds are planned. TIP funds, we just continue to try to work for some economic development through the TIP funds. Village Administrator Entler will be rolling out some facade grant programs, hopefully in the next few months. And then there are some potential new developments happening. So we will be looking at some economic development and some redevelopment costs associated with the TIF funds. We are purchasing the, out of the capital asset funds, we'll be purchasing the ladder truck this year and starting the installment loan to the bank for that purchase. We'll be acquiring the chipper truck this year. We have a vehicle budgeted in the fleet replacement fund, in the police vehicle replacement funds. And that loan also will be terminating this year from a purchase in 2023. And in the, I believe it's the customs fund, we have 2 vehicles requested from there. So continuing to make improvements to infrastructure and to services, and just challenge with the revenue. Oh, yeah.
Any questions on the fund summaries? I'm going to go ahead and move into the general fund. You've all had an opportunity to go through each of these line items. We've got the projected year end versus, our budget from 2026. There's also the proposed 2027. If anybody has any questions as we go through, please go ahead and speak up. We're going to go ahead and start with public affairs. So public affairs this year, budget for public affairs as proposed is 2.5 million. You've all had a chance to go through the expenditure sheet, so I'm going to open it up if anybody has any particular questions about any of the requested items in the Department of Public Affairs.
I was just curious. I've checked in on this every year, but the grant writer, I was looking for maybe an update on projects that they specifically have handled. That have they been bringing in? Is retaining their services still necessary? Or like how many have we done in-house versus how many have they completed for us?
Well,
Not police. I know there's like
yeah.
2 separate, but
they're still working on filing for grants, maybe.
Yeah, they give me like a good guideline and, maybe a simple spreadsheet to do rather than going through some of the programs that different grants require. I would say, we still need our personal touch, so it is worth our narratives being like from the heart. I think that so there's still like a lot of work that, we would do as department heads, I believe.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to need that to help with the 2 grants. I mean, there's some work we have to do internally to get them the information, but they are going to be grants as well.
Okay, yeah, I know, a couple of years ago, they had offered sort of a tiered service. We could sort of have this $10,000, and then there was like an 18 and a 20,000. So just curious if we are
I can take a look at that.
utilizing them to their, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly found them helpful to be able to rely on and have that backup, you know, when we have the opportunity. I mean, certainly continue to get the emails from them whenever the grants come out. You know, and some of the grants that, you know, they send us helps, you know, with follow my own rule. Burke Engineering helps us with those grants as well. And so they don't, ACS doesn't, you know, assist us with those. I think Dora works with them on a couple of, obviously that's, you know, on the COP side of it. So we do find them very helpful on that end of it. But I can, I'll put a note here to kind of take a closer look at that for that.
And I know that we haven't, the questions that I've asked.
So my last conversation with them, which was a couple of months ago, and we had talked about that and was, you know, told, and I know that Commissioner Vogt, you and I have had a conversation about this, that they focus on the national, the federal, and the more of the state grants rather than the foundation grants. So, you know, staff has been more involved in the smaller foundation grants that have come our way.
Sal, did they know if the
Tree grant.
grants as well?
So we were just paid. We were just paid almost $5,000 for a tree planting grant. Coming up this fall, we should have a new round of grants. We probably won't qualify for the planting one. We received a removal grant from 2 years ago. We should be qualifying for that for this year. And then coming up, I believe it's going to be in 27 next year. Our tree inventory grant, our tree inventory is going to be at 5 years, and they recommend every 5 years we do that. So we'll be utilizing them for that too.
So it sounds to me like they're helping department heads complete grants, but they're not necessarily haven't done a bunch separately. So we'll just check and make sure that we're purchasing the right program from them. Yeah. Okay.
Any further questions on the general fund?
Yeah, could you talk a little
Sure.
bit?
Can you take the microphone? Sorry.
Could you talk a little bit, please, about the significant increase in general counsel fees?
Well, it's budgeted the same as been budgeted prior years. Compared to the amount budgeted is the same amount budgeted in prior fiscal years. We just happen to have 2026, you know, ending well below budget. Of course, we don't know what's going to be coming up, whether it's you know, personnel or agreements. So I think we can reduce that line. It doesn't mean we can reduce the cost, but we can reduce the line.
I mean, I guess my question is, if we put something in the budget, it doesn't mean we're going to spend it, but it also means that that's sort of what we anticipate we might spend. And 197,000 is like much higher than we've spent in any other year. And I know, you know, there might be stuff coming up, but is there anything in particular, you know, that you're thinking would be coming up that would, you know, raise that up so high?
Well, we still have fire negotiations going on, and that was budgeted in fiscal year 26. And so that will carry over. We do have 705 negotiations in this fiscal year. FOP will likely start in the second half of fiscal year 2027. And so that'll be spring 2027. And so that'll be accounted for in here as well. And then, you know, any other legal issues that come up that aren't covered through like our insurance company, you know, we're also paying right now for a couple other things that we're just utilizing. The more stuff the council does, and that I have to go to legal counsel for review as well. So, I mean, when we talk about some of the revenue items that we're looking at, I mean, if we, places of eating, streaming tax, all of that stuff has to go through our legal counsel. And so that is where, some of this is budgeted for as well. So the more we do, the more legal support we need as well.
I was wondering if you could just give a little bit of information about the West Suburban Consolidated. It just keeps going up so much, and there was almost a 40% increase a couple of years ago. And do we see any relief? Do we see? Okay.
Sorry. So we will. We are in the process. I just had a meeting last week. So some of the increases are due to the updated CAD and RMS system that we've been working on through dispatch. To that end, we are very close to signing on 2 additional municipalities. And so those 2 additional municipalities will cut our costs in the future. They're going to have some buy-in into not only just the annual fees, but also into the the space needs that we have. So dispatch in December is going to be moving from River Forest to Rosemont. And so there's going to be some expansion as far as the number of telecommunicators that they have, but that'll also be funded in part by the additional municipalities that are becoming in. So the latest that we got from Westcom was that our portion of our annual fee to participate in Westcom is that our portion will actually drop because we'll have 2 additional municipalities joining us. Do you remember what it was?
That went from 5 municipalities. Now 3. It's been at 3 for I think 3 or 4 years, and 2 more are signing back up. It's cost per share. So
I did, so this was months ago, so before you. So before you had your board, there you go. Right. Yeah. Out of a new special fund. So before you had your board meeting, I was in communication with the director of Westcom, and he had initially anticipated a potentially like around $300,000 savings. I don't know if that was strictly for the Village of Forest Park or if it was divided amongst the 3 communities. And we probably won't see that until 2028.
Thanks. So I know pausing Gruben in the Grove has been proposed for some savings recovery. I am curious, we've talked about this in the past. If we do still feel like this is something that is of value to the community and they really want to see it continue, could we not charge a couple of bucks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's for parking and it's like a parking situation in that parking lot, or maybe it's if you live in town and you're a resident, it's like $2, kids are free. And if you're from out of town, it's a little bit more. Just kind of floating that around. If it's something that the community doesn't want to see go away, would that be something that folks would be willing to tolerate to keep it going?
The other thing that we have kind of thrown around too is, moving it to potentially Madison Street, Constitution Court, finding another location so that we can maybe look at some of that stuff. The expenses related to Gruben in the Grove were not only the band, but we ended up in the last couple of years, we had to buy a stage, and so there was that cost to it. And then, just having people, part of having it at the Grove is that we had to provide food and beverages, and we sold those, but it also took staff time to be able to put that through. So I think putting it on pause this year gives us an opportunity to take a look at the whole picture, identify exactly what our expenses are, because there's what was placed in the public affairs budget, which was simply the band and the stage. But there was the expenses for like the nachos and the beverages was taken out of a community center fund. And so we didn't always see the exact expense related to it. So pausing it this year, I think will give us a good opportunity to assess exactly what the expenses are, including the staff, be able to make some tweaks, make a presentation, probably, right after the first of this year, so that, we can get consensus from the council. Is this something that, these are the changes that we can make. This is what it'll cost the village. This is maybe the revenue that we can get from it to offset it. We can look for, certainly we can look for sponsors for this. I know, looking at the Arts Alliance, they get somebody to sponsor a lot of their musical entertainment. And so I think there's different ways that we can definitely bring that back, but we needed to, with all the personnel changes and everything with, former director Karen Deluski being out, it was one of those things that this year we just kind of had to put off to the side. So certainly something that we can take a look at.
And we did rent the stage each time.
Yeah.
So. There's no parking.
Or I mean the back.
Any other questions for public affairs? Okay, hearing none, I will move on to the police department. I'm gonna hand this over to you. Any questions on any of the expenses proposed in the police department? Okay, hearing none, you get off the hook, Ken. I'm going to move on to the community center. All right, do we have any questions on the proposed expenses in the community center?
I don't have a question, more so an observation, and with all of the department budgets I look at is I appreciate, and I look at individual expenses and line items, but I also appreciate, like I've said in previous meetings, we have department directors that do, and our village staff that do a tremendous job of managing our resources and stewarding our village resources very well. And so variances from budget to actual for public affairs, for the police department, and for our village budgets over many years. If you look at that, we come in budget to actual very close for all of our departments, except for the clerk's office, where our pensions and are housed, and that makes sense. But specifically with the community center, I want to just point out that in the 2025 and 2026 budgets, the community center is managing budget to actuals right on target. And so managing budget to actuals, meaning that they're managing their programs and expenses quite well. And as the community center is one of the most fundable programs that we offer and a service to the community, one of the things that I want to point out is that this is an area of Forest Park that is highly fundable from external funds and philanthropy. And that's something that I want to work with the community center in the coming year and the coming years to seek external funding to give our general fund some flexibility to address things that are not as easily funded.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also want to state, we had a department head meeting yesterday, and Interim Director Powers had mentioned that she's going through all of the programming right now and the costs associated with them to ensure that we are actually charging enough money to cover the costs. So there are some costs involved with just opening the door to the community center if we were to run, nothing. There are some, staff salaries and obviously some maintenance to the building and utilities that we may have to pay for those. But they're going through all the programming right now to make sure that we are in line with where the costs are, but that we're also in line with where we are in the community. And so we don't want to be. We want to make sure that our services are accessible to people, but we're not losing money. And so we're going to be working on that throughout the year.
Okay. Commissioner Malin Rogovan and I met last week. And I have squared away numbers for Clubhouse and whatnot. And I'm more of a math person. And so while, the programs are an expense, they also bring in money. So basically, Clubhouse pays for the items we need for the kids, the summer camp. It also pays for the part-time Clubhouse counselors. What I've found by going through, I'm pretty new to this, but I run my own checkbook, so what I've found is that a lot of the programming, as Village Administrator Entler has said, the 5 people that are working there now, myself and the 4 others, those salaries have not been fully accounted for in the programming. So we're planning on working on that this year to fund those programs. And then the program costs will then, be able to balance out everything. So I'm looking into it. So I did want to mention the Groovin in the Grove with having, less staff this year. It really would have been a struggle. So I know a lot of pushback from the seniors and the families came to us. How come you're not having it? And I just explained to them this year, we're just putting it off. And hopefully next year it'll come back with, program funds from grants and whatnot. So thank you.
Sorry. And I just want to say that when I'm talking about grants, I'm talking about writing grants, which include all the staff salaries, all of the transportation, all of the village expenses that are associated with any activity that we do. So that's the process that I'm proposing.
Any other comments or feedback? Hearing none, I'm going to move to Village Clerk's Department. After review, does anybody have any questions in regards to the Village Clerk's proposed budget?
Again, I just want to say that, across all of our program budgets, we run a very efficient and tight ship. The variance to budgets over the past couple of years, we see the police and fire pensions and the extraordinary efforts we're making to make supplemental payments to our police and fire pensions, which creates part of the deficit spending that we see, in addition to the structural deficit, which is not a problem that occurs in a single year. It's a multi-year problem. And, part of our challenge as a village is to sort of help us understand kind of what is the operating deficit that we have to attack, and then what's the multi-year issue that we need to start chipping away at, and making decisions that help us understand which deficit and which operating deficit we're attacking. But again, we're chipping away at important things. And it is important to attack the revenue. But again, everything proposed here looks great. and forgive me because I wasn't able to be here on the 8th. And so I don't know if this is a good time to bring this up, but I think Commissioner Mellon Rogovan mentioned potential like PTEL referendum and exploring that further. And I don't know if that's something that we do want to talk about a little bit more, but there are a couple of options where the village could, by ordinance, put a referendum on the ballot that would sort of increase the limiting rate to higher than what it is, and we can set a defined amount of time, so it wouldn't just be raising somebody's taxes forever. And it's not super exciting, but it is something that we could directly put towards our pension obligations, and it might be worth exploring to see if it could make a dent. It's not a great idea if it's not really going to help, but if it could help, that would be freeing up more money and obviously our general fund for other things. So I just want to bring that up.
I do have that on the list of things for us to research in this fiscal year, based on the fact that it would be a referendum question that the earliest that could happen would be in the spring of 2027. And so it wouldn't affect this fiscal year's expenditures and revenue, but I do have it on the list of things to look into. All right, anything else?
Is under the, I'm sorry, I'm looking for it right now. It's under the clerk budget, right, that we're talking about, using Lauterbach and Amen to come in and do some assessment of the finance department. That's under public affairs. Okay, so I forgot to mention that then. Is that something we could go back to a little bit and talk about? Okay. No, just, I'm not sure where in the process, you know, you and Director Olmsted are in that.
The focus right now has been to get the appropriations and the budget done. If a assessment of the finance department was something that the village council wanted us to move forward with, Director Olmsted and I would need to get a proposal first from Lauterbach and Amen as to how much that would cost, as well as assess the timeline for which that would happen. And it would have to come in front of the council first for approval.
I believe they quoted us $250 an hour. Assessment.
And we don't know how many hours that it would take. So $250 an hour with an unknown amount of hours that would need to be dedicated to it is the kind of initial quote that we got during our initial research.
And what is the assessment? Like, what is the goal of that?
Commissioner Maxim had requested us to research department assessment of the finance department as to the efficiencies, staffing. Did I get the efficiencies in the staffing and fee structure as related to the finance department?
Thank you. I am curious. There's, I'd say, several departments that could use an assessment. You know, many are operating in kind of an outdated fashion. They need some modernizing. So I don't know.
We did budget for 2 departments.
Okay.
To have assessments if the council budget.
Copy that. Okay.
So, you know, this came out of a long time, I would say several years of some frustration, and not at anyone in particular. Look, you know, Director Olmsted does an amazing job, but the finance department is so understaffed that getting any kind of meaningful financial analysis is something that has been impossible for me to get. And I've been told on many occasions by Administrator Entler that we just don't have the internal capacity to do the financial analysis that needs to get done. And I know that there are a lot of departments that are also struggling. I would argue that because we are looking at such a large ending fund balance in the general fund, and because we are struggling so hard to increase revenue, and I think it's pretty clear, all of us have looked at this, that there really aren't a lot of places to cut, right? So that we need more staffing in the finance department, but exactly what that looks like isn't really clear. And I had asked if we could do an internal analysis, like these are the positions that we have, these are the roles they fill. This is what ideally a finance department would be doing, but was told also that we didn't have the internal resources to do that. We didn't have the time to do that. That wasn't something we could do. And I have seen for the past few years that the finance department is really struggling to get stuff done. It's always, we're doing the audit, we're doing the budget, we're doing the audit, we're doing the budget. And there isn't room for the real kind of work that I know Director Olmsted is capable of doing, but just doesn't have the time to do. And so I had also asked, if we could hire someone external to do some kind of, work on different financial analyses for us. I had a resident come to me and I reached out to Administrator Entler and the mayor with that and never got a response. I've been there just doesn't seem to be the ability right now for us to do the financial work that needs to get done. So that is the basis of me asking for that to be looked into.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm gonna go back to just real fast since we were on village clerk and we went backwards. Is there any other questions on the village clerk budget? Okay, hearing none. The general fund grants is an accounting of expenses related to specific grants that the village receives. Those expenses are directly tied to the amount of the grant funding that we get. So that's listed there. I'm gonna real fast. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on to the fire department now. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed fire department budget? Okay, hearing none, I am going to, oh, one moment.
So not necessarily on the expense side, but I talked to Chief Hankus earlier today. As you all know, the NITA law, Northern Illinois Transit Law, went into effect June 1. There's provisions for medical reimbursement in there. We've talked about that. So this week, I attended a meeting with some members of the soon to be seated NITA board. And, there's no ambiguity among the leadership that Forest Park has to be reimbursed for medical expenses. So I know that the chief is working on that, with the other departments, Rosemont, Oak Park, River Forest, they're working on a billing system. We know there are a lot of challenges within the fire department in terms of, equipment, personnel, we've heard from them. But we do feel like there's a reliable funding source, coming starting in 2027, which will be here in no time. So I just want to let everyone know that that's been pretty much written in stone. We have some paperwork on this circulating, and it's in the hopper.
And I would check in. I know I've been working with Administrator Entler and Chief Hankus to sort of expedite and motivate these updates to the firehouse, and that we are currently acting on that. And we're trying to get that moving along, but hopefully that is something else that we'll be being able to bring some more updates about soon.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on to the Department of Public Health and Safety. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed budget in the Department of Public Health and Safety?
Is this the other department that you?
Yes. All right, hearing none, I am going to move on to Public Works. Public Works is divided into, we have two separate budgets. We have streets and public improvements and public property. I'm going to begin with streets and public improvements. Are there any questions on the proposed budget for streets and public improvement? So I'm going to just put this out there because we are 2 months into our budget season. In the last 3 weeks, even, we have had several sewer malfunctions and some water breaks. That does not come out of the general fund. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that's going to come out of the water fund on those. So if you see lots of cones and horses and, we've had 3 sewer collapses in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
We've had 3 sinkholes, 3 major sewer digs, and a water main break today within the last 2 to 3 weeks. And those major sewer breaks will probably be anywhere between, it's going to be upwards of 10,000 each because they were major. Just old infrastructure collapsing, showing its head after many years of it happening.
I do want to point out, though, that this is where refuse hauling and recycling and yard waste comes out of. And so, we are seeing a decrease in our expenses for that for this year and really the next 5 years of the contract because they were able to freeze us for the next 5 years.
And as I showed you, you're at your request, we saved about $5,000 in leaf removal this past year, based on probably our promotion to have people bag or leave their leaves on the ground. So we saved $5,000 there so far.
And we're going to continue doing that. We wanted to see if there was an impact in it, and we certainly saw one this year. So we'll continue as the fall comes, reminding people to bag, mulch. The garbage contract still has an unlimited number of yard waste bags through November 30th. And so we'll continue to encourage people to use that service since it's already part of the service that they're provided.
Also, SPC also said that they will promote our events for electronic recycling for next year. So we can save on that part too, also, because it'll be a free event.
Well, and they are covering our electronic recycling in the contract, right? So it's free.
Right, ongoing as the year goes on. If a resident calls, they cover that.
Yeah.
But they're also looking to sponsor our actual events during Public Works Week.
Right. So I appreciate the partnership. So public work. So the streets budget is contributing to reducing the deficit. And I did not mention this, before, but I have been conducted outreach with a Northwestern professor who would like to work with the Village of Forest Park, on leaf composting and the effect on pollinators to study resident engagement with local pollinator engaging local communities in leaving the leaves. So I have grant funding for a local program and student scientists who want to work with residents to leave the leaves. So the Environmental Control Commission is interested in that program. And so we'll be pursuing grant funding for that project.
Does anybody have any questions, comments for streets and public improvement? Okay. Hearing none, I will move on to public property. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed budget for public property? All right, hearing none, I will move on to the water fund. Does anybody have any questions or comments on expenses related to the water fund? I do want to remind everybody that we are engaged in a water rate study at the moment. And so the goal is for a draft of the results from the study to be presented to staff just after the beginning of the year, somewhere in January 2027. We've taken account into a timeline that our water rates go up on June 1st. And so we want to be able to have a proposal to the council in enough time that if we have to make some changes to it, we have ample time to do that. So, but that's the timeline that we're at right now. Staff, myself, Director Olmsted, Director Stella, we are working with Baker Tilly to get them the information that they need. It is going to be a thorough study, the amount of information that they are requesting from us. We're compiling the list of the projects that we foresee in the future as well, in addition to the financials that they're requesting. And so staff will be working on it, but likely you won't hear anything more about it until after the first of the year. Any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on to, we've got our 3 TIF accounts. So the one thing related to the TIF accounts that I wanted to, 2 things actually that I wanted to bring up that I would consider new this year are, one, we talked about the facade grants. So we have 2 healthy TIFs. I mentioned at our last meeting that, we're using TIF funds to help bring economic development to the Village of Forest Park, but we also don't want to leave behind our current businesses that are located in these TIFs. And so, with the council's approval, I am prepared to present a draft of a facade grant program. This would be a cost share with the businesses that would make an application to the village. So there would be some investment on part of the business owner, and then the village would be able to subsidize a portion of it as well. And so if there are no objections to that, I can, kind of finalize the draft on that and get that in front of the council in the coming weeks.
One question. So I see this as part of a bigger economic development plan. I feel like TIF is one option. I was reading that short-term rental revenue has been used for, infrastructure improvements like facades in a business district. So I don't know if we want to also explore that a little bit further.
Yeah.
But so zooming out a little bit from that, I would love to look a little bit deeper into, if not fully like amending zoning in certain areas, but maybe there's I know there's, retail overlays that you can kind of amend zoning a little bit to control sales tax generating businesses in the DBD, for instance. And I think we are at least, should have that discussion on what something like that might look like. And part of the grant facade program could be maybe geared towards also helping those sales tax generating businesses. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. I've been trying to do a little bit of digging on it, but I would like to see that as part of our, economic development plan. And if that's something that would work in Forest Park.
Yeah, we can certainly look into that more. One of the other things that I would like to propose, is that this would be for specifically the 2 TIFs that we have, but it is an eligible expense that we could hire an economic development consultant. I think that we're seeing some active movement in both of our TIFs, but it would certainly help to hire somebody that has the knowledge and expertise and more importantly, the contacts to be able to showcase Forest Park. We're utilizing Pete, our planner, to a certain extent, and this would be in combination, with him as well. But that economic development consultant could be funded through the TIF funds. And so again, that work would have to be contained to the TIF, but our TIFs right now are Roosevelt Road and Harlem Avenue. Those are two big major thoroughfares that have lots of opportunities that we can take advantage of. And the hope is that if we can get those two main facing streets up and running, that will have a direct impact into, our downtown business district as well.
And that's where we could potentially see the short-term rental tax focusing then in the DBD if the TIF is, on Roosevelt and Harlem.
Correct. And there's some other options that we could, I'm not saying that we should do that this year, but there are some other options that we can look at too in the future for specifically the DBD. And I know that it's the SSA that has been brought up in the past. And more immediately, we have the financial ability to hire an economic development consultant for the TIFs. And so that's something that we could get immediately started, knowing that, once we get through some of the things that, we have on our plate for our fiscal year 2027, we can certainly make it a goal for fiscal year 2028 to at least start looking at, and I know some research has been done on the SSA and the DBD that, they had talked about it in the past. But I think it would set up, some of the framework for us to be able to potentially move that along if there's, support from the businesses in the DBD to participate in that.
I want to say I love all these ideas, and especially one that we've talked about in other years, and one of our audience members has brought up several times before, the idea of controlling or kind of trying to oversee that we have more revenue or sales tax generating businesses specifically on Madison Street or in the DBD. So I love that idea. We've talked about that before, and I would really like to see that something that we look into.
Okay. Any other questions about the TIF funds? All right, I'm going to move on to VIP. Any questions in regard to expenses proposed in the VIP fund? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on to the police vehicle replacement capital asset fund. And this is a restricted fund limited solely to being able to purchase police vehicles. Police vehicles that were proposed this fiscal year are being split between two special funds. Chief, do we have two out of the? Yeah.
Definitely two squad cars. Active car that's going to be replacing a car that was smashed on campus. The driver of the other car compensating the village for the value of that car.
I'll repeat what he says. Right. So the chief is proposing that 4 vehicles for the police department this fiscal year. 2 would be squad cars. 1 would be for detectives. There was a vehicle that we had that we were utilizing. It was unfortunately it was hit by a motor vehicle driver, and that person, however, will be providing some revenue for the village. I shouldn't say revenue, but we'll be reimbursing the costs related to the damage that was done to the car. And so that is a vehicle that needs to be replaced. And then we are contemplating replacing another admin vehicle. Typically what the chief does with the admin vehicles, though, is if they're still usable, we put them into service elsewhere. Is this?
So yeah, basically my car pushed down to the deputy chief, and then if it's still serviceable, we'll push it to the investigator.
So we wouldn't be losing a car. It would be keeping vehicles in rotation. But what the chief had stated was that typically what we've been doing is we purchase the chief car. The chief car then rotates down to the deputy chief. Deputy chief's car would then rotate to either, typically the detectives unit to use because they are not marked vehicles. So any questions on this?
These were all vehicles that were budgeted in 2026 and not purchased. So we did not purchase any new or replacement vehicles for the police department.
So for those at home, Director Olmsted just reminded us all that these were vehicles that were budgeted in last fiscal year that were not purchased. So we carried over those expenses to fiscal year 27. All right, I'm going to move on to fleet replacement capital assets. Any questions on the expenses in this fund? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move into foreign fire tax. Any questions on expenses in this fund? Right. I'm going to move on to the IMRF pension fund. This is where, you know, our expenses come from for that. Social Security, Medicare is another fund that we just have separated so that we know what is going into Social Security and Medicare. I'm going to move on to the motor fuel tax. Any questions on expenses in this account?
Sorry. I just wondered, are we seeing increased revenue because of the gas prices?
So the most recent disbursement, let's see, would be for May.
Just curious.
I mean, it's so
I know we only get a portion, but I'm
right,
just curious.
I'd say it's been about level.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say increased.
All right.
Because I don't think was it July 1st is when the increase was supposed to go in, I believe. For
Yeah.
The state rate. So that's been paused, I believe, for this increase in the state rate of the entity tax, I believe was paused.
Okay.
So I don't anticipate, and that rate increase doesn't always trickle down to us receiving more.
All right.
At this point, consistent is good.
Yeah, I've been watching different. Yeah. Okay. Just question. Forgive me if you covered this, but it might be helpful just to remind folks a very broad overview of like these funds and that they're restricted. And so they can be only used in certain ways. And so if you do see something being, you know, spent here, it's not necessarily, we wouldn't have been able to use it somewhere else. I don't know if you want to just give like a little.
You just did that.
Yeah, so, yeah. Do you want me to specifically just talk about NFT? Is that fine? Or just restricted funds in general? So everything that's spent from the motor fuel tax fund has to be authorized by Illinois Department of Transportation. It's restricted by the state. So whether it's construction and we pass a resolution, whether it's general maintenance and we pass a resolution, it all has to be approved by the state. These new line items that you're seeing for 2027, basically prior years have been paid from the general fund and reimbursed to the general fund from the motor fuel as an annual transfer. All the differences right now is we're just allocating these expenses as approved direct to this fund, eliminating the annual transfer, helping cash flow. And so pretty much the same with all the other restricted funds as well. There are outlying legal restrictions. You know, we can't like for VIP, for MFT, for IMRF, there are outside entities that restrict the use of these funds. We try to resource them as best we can to alleviate other expenses, but we do have to adhere to the restrictions in place.
So speaking of additional restrictive funds, we're going to move into state seizure. So again, as Director Olmsted said, you know, this is very restrictive. There are only certain things that we can, you know, solidify as expenses out of this, and it is all for the police department. So do we have any questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll move to police DUI. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move to federal customs. Any questions on this fund? Okay, well, that comes to the end of our budget as proposed. So I'll open the floor to any general comments or questions. Okay.
just because I wasn't here on the 8th, I wanted to just mention a couple of things, but I'll be brief. The places for eating tax, I just wanted to be able to weigh in on where we are with that. And I do think there's a lot of work that should be done with the businesses and the community. There should be soliciting feedback so that we can write an ordinance and formulate a plan that's fair for everybody. But I do understand in this economic climate, it's really tough for everybody, including the village, and identifying sources of revenue is very important. So my notes on this, if we can actually reach out to the businesses and get some open discussions with them, I'd like to see updated data, just to be projecting revenues off of 23.
So the data for Forest Park was off 2025. It's the other and other communities that's 2023. So the Forest Park sales tax data was based off of
Okay.
calendar year 2025.
And then I think, I know Director Olmstead had said the work is the same, whether it's 1% or 2%, but I think we have to slow roll it if we are to start it in the next fiscal year or the one following, just because of the, nature of the times. But starting small, maybe at 1.25% and allowing the businesses to keep 0.25%. I know some towns let them keep like 1% of what they paid, which is really nothing. It's like, $300 here or whatever. So I think it would be helpful to allow the businesses to keep a certain percentage for their administrative costs. And I think we should explore including a de minimis clause that would allow the smaller businesses whose taxable sales are below a to be determined threshold to be exempt from paying the tax. There's an example from Chicago. I'm happy to send everyone, or you can have a copy of this. But they have that in their ordinance, and I think it's about 80,000. The village could choose to do something a little bit higher, but I think it's worth talking about and exploring. And then I do support Commissioner Nero's suggestion to give something back. Again, staff should be working, and the accounts and finance department should be working with businesses to recommend some reasonable options for the council's consideration, whether that working with the police department, if it is hours, if that's something that can, they can handle, but identifying something that works for everybody that we could potentially give back to the businesses. And then that folds into the larger economic development plan. I know, as Commissioner Max had mentioned, we've all talked about limiting non-sales tax generating businesses in the downtown business district. And I think it's time to explore that. And we talked about PTEL. And then I just wanted to mention a couple of things about overnight parking. I know Commissioner Mellon Rogovin is working on this with her streets commission. But back in 21, I had sent a proposal to the village administrator and the mayor about creating residential parking zones. I think I also sent it to Chief Gross. And I think there are some things that we can explore, whether it's residential parking zones, which would alleviate some of the pressure from the businesses on the residential streets that are very nearby. And then looking into overnight parking through the app where, I think the 5 nights are free, but then after that, I think Oak Park has up to 15 additional nights that you could purchase for $7 a night. So exploring something that expands that a little bit, maybe identifying increased areas of demand that need overnight parking. But I do support looking into that, and I'm happy to share all of my old proposals if anybody wants to talk about this.
Okay. You're welcome. Does anybody else have anything to say?
Okay, hearing none, the going to move forward, utilizing this fiscal year draft budget. And it'll be the basis for the appropriations ordinance that will be up for approval at Monday's village council meeting. Do we have any public comment? Okay, just wanted to make sure you got your chance, Joe. All right, I'm going to hand this back to the mayor.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Thanks, staff and other department heads for your input today. We are certainly in challenging times. We've had some really robust discussions about our challenges, about opportunities for new revenue. I mentioned earlier, the NETA law. There was a meeting today of the Regional Transit Authority, the RTA, which is about to be replaced by the Northern Illinois Transit Authority. You can watch that meeting on their YouTube channel. It was a meeting of what's called the Ad Hoc Transition Committee. And that NETA law was 1,025 pages. There's a lot in there that is beyond transit. Many of us know that the governor proposed something in the last legislative session called Build Up Illinois. It would have taken away some authority on the part of local governments to control, parking and other zoning matters. But as part of the NETA law, they've created what's going to be called the Joint Development Office, and this is going to be a section of NETA that is really going to focus on developing transit-oriented development. Given where we are, Forest Park is essentially one big transit town. What I heard on the call earlier is that the CTA has inventoried all of their owned lots. We have a number of those here in this community. And over the next couple of years, I strongly suspect that we're going to see the NETA Joint Development Office look at sizable developments on the underused CTA lots in Forest Park. I think this is going to create incredible opportunities for our community. So I would just suggest to you that even though we're in challenging times, I think we're going to come through it. I encourage you all to watch this meeting on YouTube. To learn about, some of the new opportunities available through this law. There are going to be grants available to developers making transit-oriented development. There are going to be funds available for local communities like us to update zoning codes. There are going to be funds available for communities like us to do our strategic planning. So all the things that we're talking about doing to kind of set us on the course for the next decade of growth and development in Forest Park could be funded through this new law. And so, while we're doing a great job of finding new revenue sources, I think there are other new opportunities out there. So I want to close on an optimistic note. That's all I'm trying to say. So if there's no public comments, which I've heard they're not this evening, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, motion to adjourn has been moved by Commissioner Maxam. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Mellon McGovern. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Commissioners, we're adjourned.